Today I'm going to be very smart. I'm going to do my preliminary chanting before I start talking. Because I start talking 2 hours later, preliminary chanting, people are like, what's that? I'm like, what's that? So I'm going to do some preliminary chanting. And while I'm doing that, all of you please, if you have it, you can do it with me. If you don't have it, recite Mixama, Arabas Nadi, that'll be fine. Okay? We have a lot of obstacles for a book holder. One day I'll have a book holder that holds the book. Can we maybe turn a fan on? It's very hot. Okay. I'll do Lama Tsongkhapa Sukuru Yoga to invite the blessings of our gurus and lineage gurus. And then afterwards, I will do Manjushri's praise, Gangoma, homage to Manjushri, and one round of his mantra and some of his longer mantra. And then Mandala offering and Prashna Paramita. And then we'll start, alright? These are traditional for the monastery, most of it. It's very, very important for our own spiritual practice to always invoke upon our Guru. And it's very, very important to invoke upon our Guru and our Guru's Guru and our Guru's Guru. And there are many, many valid reasons for that. So the best way to invoke upon our Guru is not simply just thinking about our Guru and calling out, but to do something formal, such as Lama Tsongkhapa Sukuru Yoga. When we do Lama Tsongkhapa Sukuru Yoga well and we invoke upon our Guru well, it's much, much easier to understand the Dharma. It's much, much easier for the Dharma realizations to come through. It's much, much easier for us to gain attainments. And when we invoke upon the lineage gurus, then the blessings come directly to us. We can get blessings. We can definitely get blessings through books and statues and stupas and altars. We can do that. But those don't have a consciousness, and the blessings are limited and they cannot be passed. There's no oral transmission. When we receive Dharma from a living guru, the living guru has a consciousness. That consciousness in which the teachings are stored are passed to you. So when you receive the teachings directly from your guru or directly from a teacher, as opposed to from a book, there's a major difference in attainments. From a book, it is not possible to gain attainments. From a lama, it is possible. Therefore, according to His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, those Tantra gurus or those lamas who can teach us the Dharma and pass us the lineage are highly revered. Much more revered than books and statues and altars, because they are living and they are with us and they can transmit the real teachings to us alive and put it in our minds. That's one. Second, when we are far away from our teachers, when we are far away from teachers, or when we're in a place we're not allowed to have teachings, or in a place that it's not allowed, it's restricted, or if we don't have a temple, we don't have a gathering place, we don't have a place to gather, or we are deficient in limbs, or we're deficient in our sensory powers, eyes, ears, nose, etc., or we're retarded, or if we're extremely ill, then those are very good reasons for us not to receive teachings directly from the Guru or to attend Dharma sessions. Why? Because when our Guru has passed away, or when our Guru is distant or far away, then we have no choice but to practice on our own. When our Gurus are alive, and they can teach, and they make an effort, and we have the merit to be there, then we should take full advantage. It's just like when the Buddha is not alive anymore, we have no choice. We must worship Buddha images. When the Buddha is alive, wouldn't it be silly not to go see the Buddha, but to keep his image and worship it at home? So we have to think about it in a more logical way. While our Guru's alive, take advantage. Take full advantage. And I read this just yesterday in His Holiness's teachings, just yesterday. And I was quite moved by it because I thought to myself, yes, I am so glad all those 20, 25 years I made effort to go to Dharma teachings, to stay in Ganden, to stay in the Dharma centers, when I could have done something else, when I could have had something else, well, I could have pursued something else But sometimes in those past 25 years, thoughts do arise just like anybody else. Maybe I should have done something else. Maybe I should have pursued my own career that I wanted to do. Maybe I should have done this and maybe I should have done that. So when I thought about what His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, it really, really was nectar for me. Because while my gurus are alive, while I can get teachings, why do I scheme or why do I pursue to please a statue, an empty Dharma book or empty shrine? Wouldn't it be better to worship and to listen and to be near and to propagate and to help and to disseminate and also to assist one that is alive? So when our guru's dead, we can make many statues of Buddhas and gurus and say it's one and pass it to many people and say, pray, it's beneficial. While our guru's alive, we don't get teachings, we don't pursue the teachings, and we don't push ourselves to gain attainments and practice, and we worship statues, and we're no better than idolaters. We're not bad, but I'm telling you, a more beneficial method. Remember, none of the Dharma is ever designed to scold us or to hurt us. No. It is designed to point out in us what we can improve to make a happier situation for ourselves. And that's very, very important, all right? And also, we have a beautiful Dharma center through the efforts of many people in many, many ways. So we should fully utilize it. Fully utilize it. When we utilize it together, the karma that we create, the merit we create is that it will become more and more and more full. More and more bigger and more beneficial. Remember, we are not into numbers. We have never been, I have never been, you have never been into numbers, but we're into benefiting others. So if there's more people attending Dharma talk, there's more benefits. More benefit. So it's wonderful, it's wonderful like that. Now, obeisance to my Guru, protecting Manjushri, who holds in his heart the scriptural text symbolic of seeing all things as they are, whose intelligence shines forth like the sun, unclouded by the illusion traces of ignorance, who teaches the 60 ways with the loving compassion of the Father for his only Son. All creatures caught in prison samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You who strike it unto thy proclamation of the Dharma arouses us from the stupor of delusions and frees us from the iron chains of karma, who wields the sword, works thoughts of pure, clearing away the darkness of ignorance. You whose princely body is adorned with 112 marks of a Buddha, who has been pure from the beginning. It's important to request Lord Manjushri during the mantra, although it's only 108, very short, that the Dharma may penetrate your innermost mind. And that when it penetrates your innermost mind, it may cut your innermost habituations, which is the source of all your fears, the source of all your sufferings, the source of all your pain, the source of all your past, present, and future sufferings, is your deep-seated habituations. So the only way to remove those habituations, according to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, in the meaning of life, is to understand or have a valid view. Have a valid view. In order to have a valid view, we need to study the Dharma. When we study the Dharma, we have a valid view. When we have a valid view, we're able to have the knowledge and example in order to cut those deep-seated habituations. Our enemies of all, the author of all of our individual sufferings is those deep-seated habituations. So those who engage in study and reading and understanding and happily attend class, they really want to destroy the deep-seated unhappiness. So when they complain, there's some leeway. For those who try to avoid class, for those who don't study, who study at the last minute, who don't take the time away, make excuses to miss class or never to even apply effort, then those beings are not bad. But when sufferings arise and they don't know the cause or how to apply its cessation or its method, there's no leeway to complain. Why? When there's food, don't eat. When hungry, how to complain? So we invoke upon Lord Manjushri's power, not for any other items that we invoke Buddhas for. We invoke upon him for the highest of the high, which is the penetration of the understanding of Dharma, which cuts through our most subtle habituations, which creates so much suffering for ourselves and others, which makes people go away from us, makes us go away from other people. And that is what we need to pray to Manjushri for. That is most important. Lama da gobe chisi jama yang cha se lo umara bazana li umara bazana. Umara bazana li umara bazana. Namo Manjushri Kumara Buddhaya Bodhisattvaya Mahasattvaya Mahakarunukaya Zeyata Om Araze Baraze Shude Vishude Shodaya Vishudaya Amale Vimale Nimale Savare Rutsale Hum 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 Pe 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 Soha Om Namo Manjushri Kumara Buddhaya Bodhisattvaya Mahasattvaya Mahakarunukaya Zeyata Om Araze Baraze Shude Vishude Shodaya Vishudaya Amale Vimale Nimale Sayavare Rutsale Hum 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 Pe 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 Soha Om Namo Manjushri Kumara Akumara Buddhaya Bodhisattvaya Mahasattvaya Mahakarunukaya Zeyada Om Araze Biraze Shude Vishude Shodaya Vishudaya Amale Vimale Nimale Zaya Vare Ruru Sale Hom 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 Pe 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 Soha. I bow down to you, Manjushri, with the brilliance of your wisdom, O compassionate one. Illuminate the darkness and close in my mind. Enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and the text that explain them. I bow down to you, Manjushri, with the brilliance of your wisdom, O compassionate one. Illuminate the darkness and close in my mind. Enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and the text that explain them. I bow down to you, Manjushri, with the brilliance of your wisdom, O compassionate one. Illuminate the darkness and close in my mind. Enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and the text that explain them. Masan Cheme Sheda Paro Shie Ma Shema Kana Pingoni, Soso Ni Shi Ju Ma Tu Sun Yo, Yu Na Cha Se Lo, Te Ya Da Ka De Ka De Para Ka De Para Sanga De Bodi Ye So, Te Ya Da Ka De Ka De Para Ka De Para Sanga De Bodi So, Te Ya Da Ka De Ka De Para Ka De Para Sanga De Bodi Ye So, Chu Ji Jia Ho So Ma Ba Chu Ji Na Ma Pe Wa Na Ki Ji Ma Sha Ma Dang Ji 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 Ma Bian Ba Yu Ling Bang Ji. With this Dharma, may I make it strong, much stronger. Where there's a misunderstanding of Dharma, May I take the time, the energy, the resources, may I take the pains, and may I take the sacrifices in order to clear up its misunderstanding. And when the Dharma is strong already, may I make it much stronger. May I take full responsibility for every single sentient being to have them understand the Dharma. May I not shirk and be afraid of my responsibilities or run away or shrink away. Because knowing that running away only reinforces my habituations of fear based on imputed wrong cognition. Therefore, I will not run away, I will not escape. I will in fact take full responsibility for taking responsibility for others and myself. I gain liberation. Today, after skimming through, reading through The Meaning of Life by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I've gained even more profound faith in His Holiness and very moved by His Holiness. And the reason is because I usually hear people complain that Dharma is very hard. Dharma is very difficult. And the people who are learning basic fundamental Dharma complain that they would like higher teachings. And the ones who get higher teachings such as this complain that it's very complicated and very hard. And it's not just the human nature's manifestation of our ego, laziness. And what happens is, when I read through this, I realized that reading it once will definitely I will not be able to absorb the depth. And some of it I've heard before, I realized that I relearned it again. And when I read through this, and I think just one little book has so much meaning, and the whole meaning is contained in the mental continuum of someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The whole thing, by memory and verbatim, is contained in the memory of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Never mind memorizing what's in this book. Even grasping or trying to understand it, we find it incredibly, incredibly difficult. And we sweat. So when we think about it in that way, there are beings who are more advanced than us in their spiritual practice. There are beings. Sometimes we doubt if there are Buddhas. Sometimes we doubt if there are Bodhisattvas. Sometimes we doubt if the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas really do confer what it says in the scriptures. I believe they do. And there are ways of examining it, and one way of examining it is, I've done it, my personal method is through my guru. And the reason is because I look at my teachers and I see that they're unstinting in their perseverance to spread the Dharma. Unstinting. No matter what obstacles they face, they're unstinting and they never stop in their efforts to spread the Dharma. And for even one person, they will go round and round in many ways and many methods. They will use their personal time, energy, advice, knowledge, training, money, resources, friendship, words, and kindness for one person again and again and again and again, over and over, no matter how disappointing this person can be to themselves and to other people. They can do this over and over and over. This is what we call enthusiastic perseverance, effort, which is one of the perfections of the six paramitas. One of the perfections of the six paramitas. And to have that perfection becomes like a jewel ornament on one's body. Why? Jewels are meant to beautify us. So when we have the six perfections, like the six types of jewels we can wear on our body, they beautify our personality, they beautify our being, they beautify us as a person. And therefore we become someone worthy of praise and worthy of respect, one who has six paramitas. So our teachers can learn so much Dharma and absorb so much Dharma, like His Holiness. So much. That means they've taken that much time away from their personal life, their personal pursuits, and their personal wants and their personal needs. They've taken away from their personal aspirations and their personal desires. Every human being wants a comfortable house, a comfortable partner, a comfortable existence, lots of money to take care of commitments. taking care of commitments and all that never ever end. They don't end for us when we're young. They don't end for us when we're middle-aged. They don't end when we're old. They never end. And those debts are carried into future lives. Why? The actual money debts are not carried, but the emotional and the karmic dispositions planted in our minds will be carried into future lives. So what happens is, when we look at our teacher's knowledge, in this case, just one book, and then they have the knowledge of many, 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 many books, and they understand it so well and depthly, they must have spent long nights in meditation, many hours of study, much sacrifice under the feet of their teachers, at the sacrifice of their own personal comfort, health, appearance, and their own pursuit of material happiness. They have given all that up in order to pursue the Dharma, in order that we can get something so profound. And this is in Justice Holiness. I have many gurus like that. In fact, all. I have 14. So therefore, in that way, I look at them and I gain profound respect. Profound. Why? In my lazy mind, I haven't done that. And I advertise my laziness. I actually make jokes on the throne. I'm lazy. I go out to discos. I eat hamburgers, and I do nothing. And I'm proud of it. And I advertise it. And I SMS it. And I put it on a poster. I wear it on T-shirts. And I say it all the time. In fact, it's so bad that I've gone to the point of glamorizing it. So when I look at my teachers, how can I disobey them? Those who are so learned and taking so much time to learn. Then I've seen my teachers come up with very, very different types of personalities. In the years that I've been in Dharma, 25 years, those who are flippant, jolly and happy, they come in and out like it's a fad. They do it for a few years, a few months, a few days, and then they're gone. They're in, they're out. It's like a new lollipop flavor. Yet my teacher is extremely patient with them, giving them gifts, advice, and love, and always available for them when they're ready. I've seen my teachers, such as Geshe Turim Gyaltsen. I've seen my teachers. When the students come and they just disappear for years, they come back again, they disappear for years, and every time he sees them, it's like he's seeing his own newborn child with love and affection in his eyes. And then I've seen my own teachers. Incredible. Like Khyentse Jampa Yeshe Rinpoche, when his students have said negative things about him, yes, have said negative things and have doubted him, a pure monk like him, and have scourged him, because he's mentioned that to me. When they come to see him, he is smiling, he is kind, and he teaches them the Dharma. No trace of holding on to anything from the past. Where does that come from? Why is that different than us? Why is that different? It says here, by His Holiness, a real Sangha has 4 very special qualities. One is, if someone harms them, they do not respond with harm. Incredible. How many times have people said something to us or did something to us and we respond back? We may not do it immediately because we have our own little ways. Some smile, no problem, people are looking. When no one's looking, we get them. Some do it immediately. But a real Sangha member, Arya Sangha, is someone that when they're harmed, they don't harm back. They don't respond with harm. The second quality, His Holiness says, is someone displays anger towards them. They do not display anger back. Displaying anger back means what? Shouting, screaming, that's not anger. Means with anger, they react back. Why? We can talk very nicely, but we can be very angry. Talking loud or soft is not an indication of anger. But when someone talks angry to us, a quality of a Sangha is they do not respond back with anger. Number 3, if someone insults them, they do not answer with insult. They answer with knowledge and wisdom. Number 4 quality of a Sangha is when they are accused of something, they do not retaliate. Those 4 qualities alone in the Holy Sangha makes us praise the person. Praise that being that holds those kind of vows. Incredible, incredible. Why, in this day and age, which of us can hold even one of those? Very, very difficult. That comes from what? That comes from not putting on the robes and cutting one's hair, or designating some position, or living in some temple or monastery. Because some of us have been monks and nuns in past lives and this lives, but we still are angersome, we still retaliate back negatively, we still get revenge. Putting on the robes doesn't make you a Sangha. Developing those qualities from the 6 paramitas make you a true Sangha. And by the way, a true Sangha doesn't have to be a monk or a nun. Doesn't have to be a monk or nun. Just they represent the true Sangha. So, when I look at my gurus and I see that even when they were very young, when I read their biographies, even when they're very young, their pursuits and their struggle and their pain was never for themselves. Never. And that my struggles and my pursuit as a youngin, when I was a child, was always for myself. Was to get good food for myself, to get a good partner, to get friends, good house, good money, good reputation, a good job. That my whole life, even from youth, has been spent on getting things for myself. But my gurus, when I examine them, put themselves through retreats, initiations, making offerings. They went through study. They went through debates. And they spent their whole childhood that if any obstacles came towards them taking away from the Dharma, they could not be deterred. Not be deterred. Some of us, even when we have no obstacles to the Dharmas, we create our own obstacle. We create our own obstacle. But when we read the biographies of our great masters, these are not stories. These are masters that we see in front of our eyes. These are masters that we see living. That even when they're very young, they pursue the Dharma, even through much difficulties. So there are masters who go through tremendous difficulties, and they overcome, and they still shine through and share the Dharma and not be affected by their pain. And even privileged lamas, highly privileged lamas, with respect, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who is brought up and born with a golden spoon in his mouth, but was never spoiled by it. How many of us are born into wealth and luxury and prestige and name and being pampered and having money and wealth and everything easy? We grow up useful, responsible, caring, loving, and we take on even more responsibility as a sign of our good breeding. How many of us? So some of you say, well, with His Holiness, he got the best teachers in the land, he got the respect of the land, he got a big palace, he's really wealthy, he got money and everything. Yes, but look what he's doing with it. Look what he's doing with it. And how many of us, if we're born into that kind of privilege, would do the same thing? So either this way or this way, it's the same side of the coin. Living in wealth and being spoiled by it, or living in poverty and be distraught and brought down by it, is the same side of the coin. Attachment is attachment. And I will get into that more later. Attachment is attachment, according to His Holiness. So, when we look at their upbringing, we read their biographies, they totally put themselves into the Dharma. They engage into the Dharma. And they're very humble about it. From the time of their youth. And then in their teenage years, they also delve deeper into the Dharmas. They do their retreats and practices. And they learn Guru devotion. And then in their middling years, they struggle very much to teach the Dharma, to build, to make it grow, to make it expand. And in their older years, they're more relaxed because their body can't take it, but they still teach and help and travel endlessly. Endlessly. Like my gurus, His Holiness Tadjilaki Rinpoche, the great ex-abbot of Gandhin Monastery, which some of you have met, 81, still travels non-stop. Coughs like there is no tomorrow. He has a coughing disease that he has absorbed from others, that he coughs non-stop. And he coughs and coughs. It's been going on for over a decade. There's no cure. Yet in between his coughs, he'll give Dharma teachings. He'll cough until he's red and blue and sputum's coming up. You can see it, but he still teaches. And when he walks, people have to assist him and help him. But his determination to teach, to spread the Dharma, does not stop. Why? Those are signs of a person who has achieved the 6 paramitas. All self and pursuant or pursual of self is gone. So I've read these biographies of my lamas from a young age. They engage in practice. I've seen how they work tirelessly for other people. I've seen many of my lamas go through extreme disappointments and problems. I've seen my lamas also go through extreme accusations and difficulties and extreme people saying they did this. I've seen it in America too. They never ever react back with harm, ever. And they constantly have the welfare of others in their mind. And whatever they do, their actions, whether they eat, they sleep, how they look, where they live, what they use, even the cars and even the food and utensils they use, even that is premeditated to benefit another being when they see it. So in fact, they're so geared toward benefiting others. When I think about this, I believe there's a Buddha. Why? Buddhas have all these qualities. Buddhas have all these qualities. Yet these qualities are so far away from myself. But there's someone, inverted commas, in between. And if someone like that can develop these qualities, and I don't, then therefore these qualities and their dependence on development, or how they develop, is dependent on knowledge. And that knowledge must have been acquired from another being who had acquired those qualities. And those qualities can only be taught if you have acquired those qualities. If you're a biochemist professor, then you may be able to lecture on it. But if you had never studied biochemistry, how would you be able to ever lecture on it or talk about it, or even forget about scientific research and get funds for it? How is that possible? So like that, when you think about it, the Buddhas do exist because we have seen in the qualities of our own teachers hints of those qualities. Hints can be our teachers or can be our own obscurations. I choose the latter, our own obscurations. So when we see our teachers with these qualities are obtainable. Obtainable. Why? Because there are beings out there who have these qualities. There are beings through difficulties do not flinch. No matter how much they get materially, they're not deterred. They don't become greedy. Nothing. I heard recently, I called up my Dharma mother, Mamie, about 2 days ago, and I talked to her for about 2 hours. And she told me that His Holiness visited Los Angeles recently and gave 3-day teachings. And anyway, my favorite star was there, Lindsay Wagner, Bionic Woman. So one of my friends went up there and told Lindsay Wagner, Tenram, she really likes your movies. So she gave her website where we can get her latest movies that's coming out. So that's kind of exciting. And then they said, if you ever travel to Malaysia, you can look him up. She said, thank you. And I was like, no, give her my card. Can you imagine the Bionic Woman here? I'll be the Bionic Rinpoche, she'll be the Bionic Woman, and you guys will be Bionic dropouts. No, just kidding. So, because I'm not inviting you to my Bionic party, it's just going to be me and her talking about old times. So what happens is and it cost them $900,000 US to invite His Holiness and the whole entourage for a 3-day teaching. $900,000 US. That's what Thupten Darjeeling had to raise. And not ringgits, dear. Not rupiah, not Thai baht, not yuan. $900,000 US they had to raise. And they brought His Holiness over. And it benefited how many thousands? And the leftover money was about $200,000 or $300,000 US. Something like that, because I think they had to raise something like $600,000, but they had to raise $600,000 minimum. They raised $900,000 US. And so the $300,000 they offered up His Holiness. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama offered everything back. So they distributed everything to charities. And I know that's why they call him His Holiness and they don't call me His Holiness. Because if they offer me $300,000 US, dear, I wouldn't give it back. I keep it. I keep it and say thank you. Call out my accountant Ruby and my other accountant Madam Lowe, say, bank it in, quick fast, bank it in, and let's see what we go shopping for. And I got these great little 4 stores to go shopping, but I won't brag. There's two in Bukit Bintang, there's one in 1U, and there's another one at SS2, you know, fabulous stores. I love going shopping there. You guys should look it up. I don't know, some Dharma store, some weird mystical thing. Anyway, look it up. Try to go on Suzanne's shift. She has commitments. Okay. Some of you got that, some of you are a little slow. Now, so my point is, even these great teachers, even the wealth that they acquire, they use it for others. They dare not use it for themselves, or they don't use it for themselves, or the wealth that they get does not faze them, or turn them, or change them. We can see that very quality. How many of us can do that? Some of us get wealth, we'll immediately say bye-bye Dharma, we go have fun, we go on vacation for 5, 6, 7 years, and we come back if we're still alive, or our teacher's still alive. Some of us say, no, I think I'll just relax, you know, in my palace. I'm going to buy, 30 houses, and I'm going to, one day, every week, I'm going to change to a different house. Some of us say, no, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that, buy this and buy that, I'm going to open this, I'm going to do that, and the time just goes by. And people like my teachers, it doesn't faze them. You can give them any amount of money. You can throw any kind of material things on it. It doesn't faze them. That when we observe, it should be an inkling to their true nature of their mind and why they're here on this planet, a true nature. And then cannot be fazed by money and material things. And a very, very strong quality that I've seen in my gurus, and I've heard from their attendants, such as His Holiness Kanche Rinpoche, etc., is that they usually spend more than they have. They spend and then they worry about it later. And the thing that they spend on is not themselves. It's never themselves. Cozy is very famous. Cozy's Kanche Rinpoche's main assistant for many years now. She's very holy. She always complains that she doesn't have enough money. She doesn't have this, she doesn't have that. Recently, past, present, always. She's not a bad complaint. It just tells me the insight in nature of her Lama. And herself also. Herself. And money doesn't faze them. Praise. In fact, when you see these high lamas, when you praise them or say things about them, they lessen the praise. Or they try to go away from it. When you prostrate to them, they look away, they look down, they think about something else, they visualize something else, or they fold their hands. Why? Praise and admiration does not faze them or doesn't upset them in any way. Praise, money, reputation, hardship, difficulties, and the amount of time that they give to others, it never, ever phases them or moves them away from the practice. When we see these qualities, we know there's a Buddha. We know there's a Buddha. Why? We cannot see the actual Buddha enacting these qualities due to our obscurations. But the Buddhas have these qualities and taught these methods on how to gain these qualities. And these people practice and master those qualities. And they taught their students, and they taught their students, and they taught their students all the way down to us. So there's a source for this. It isn't simply develop these qualities. And when I say these things, if you feel guilty or uncomfortable, don't. It's not meant to make you feel guilty or uncomfortable. It's meant to open your eyes to let you see inferential logic, that there is Buddhas. Their teachings are beneficial, and their teachings are alive, and they're real. And we can see that by the presence of our gurus. And their perseverance, their wisdom, their effort, their extreme patience towards us, their enthusiasm, and their generosity. We can see that in our teachers and our gurus. And to upset such a being, to displease or to not make such a being happy, then we push away all hopes of self-liberation for ourselves. Why? Don't talk about karma. Some accept, some theoretically accept, some don't accept. Such a being, if we displease and we make them unhappy, and we push them away all the time, don't talk about karma, then we push ourselves away from those very qualities. We like those beings because they have those qualities. So when we go near those beings, everything we live or be or enact with them or interact with them is to develop those qualities. When we push those beings away or displease them or create displeasure in their minds or create displeasure in our minds about them, then we push ourselves away from those qualities. Why? Where other place can we get those qualities that are abiding, permanent, without motive, free of the 8 worldly dharmas? Where else? So in that way, when we meditate and think about it, how precious it is to have a living master, a living guru, who teaches us the Dharma patiently, again and again and again. We offer really nothing back in return. We can offer service, we can offer help, we can offer material items, we can offer money, we can offer sponsorship, we can offer all these things, and these things are necessary. But in comparison to what our Guru offers us and to many people, it cannot be compared. Therefore, to be stingy around our Guru, we will never develop generosity, which is one of the 6 perfections. To be impatient around our Guru, or to be not listen and follow, that's patience. We push ourselves away from patience. And likewise the 6 paramitas, enthusiastic effort, etc. If we can be sometimes enthusiastic near our teachers, and sometimes we fall, sometimes we go up, sometimes we go, and it's constant and there's no end to it, then for us to be consistent will never happen. Why? If we can displease such a master that shows us this quality all the time, and yet we show the reverse or opposite back, how can we develop these qualities? The very reason we call this being our Guru is because they have these qualities and we've seen something of their qualities. Perseverance, effort, enthusiasm, their wisdom, their patience, and their generosity. We see it and we believe and we trust it. And therefore we call this person our teacher. So therefore, we call this person our teacher is because this person has qualities that we don't have. It's not we're bad and they're good. It's that we need to be close to such a being in order to develop these qualities. And if we're around these beings and we don't take advantage to develop these qualities, that means we will never develop these qualities. If we never develop these qualities, then we cannot complain when things go wrong for us. When life, year after year after year, we can be very poor and struggling all the time. We can have people who are our enemies, people who don't want to live with us, people who don't want to be friends with us, people who accuse us and see things wrongly about us. Or we can be very wealthy and we become lazy, we don't want to practice, or we become despondent. When we're around our teachers and we can act this way, whatever our condition is, rich or poor, is the same thing. And I will explain more. It's the same thing. Will produce the same results. Same. Whether you're very wealthy and you're attached to your wealth and your position, will create the same type of karma as a very poor person who's attached to someone who has wealth. Same. They go to the same place. They end up the same place. So, when we meet such a being and we call our teachers and we displease them and we disappoint them or we don't follow their instructions, then we must think more logically, as His Holiness says. In the Buddhist teachings, we're taught to even forgive and love our enemies. What more there is to say about our own Guru who teaches us the precious path to enlightenment? It must be more than love. It must be bordering on mindful fanaticism. Mindful. So when our Guru gives us instructions, we should be fanatical about carrying them out. When he gives us practices, we be fanatical. Fanatical? Joseph? Fanatical.
接近疯狂的。
about carrying them out. Do you know why? If we have observed our teachers to have these qualities, then everything that they teach us, peaceful, wrathful, laying down, sitting up, they come near us, they go away from us. They say come nearby, or they tell us to stay away. Or they scold us. They scold us for things we did, we didn't do. They compliment us, they give us gifts, they don't give us things. They tell us to wait here or go here. Must be to develop those qualities. Must be. So if we fight back or we are not following them fanatically, then we actually don't want those qualities. And if we don't want those qualities, we're not bad. But there are two ways to that one. If we don't want those qualities, A, we don't understand the benefits of those qualities and the destruction of our end, or the fear or the problem of our end that will arise later. A, B, we're simply too lazy. Due to what? We're evil? No. Very strong habituation. Very strong. So therefore, when we have such a being, when we have such a teacher, when we have the Dharma, when we have this opportunity, what happens is this. We have a chance to develop those qualities. We have a chance to develop those incredible paramita qualities, those 6 qualities. And they're incredible because those qualities are the source of everyone's happiness and security and stability and the source of us getting what we really, really want, materially and emotionally. Everything that we want that makes us unhappy, everything that makes us lazy, everything that makes us angry, everything that makes us greedy, everything that makes us doubtful, everything that makes us, with no effort, lack of consistency, everything that makes us that, and those qualities make us suffer, will be taken away and removed when we achieve the 6 paramitas. Example, right now you're listening to this, you're going, wow. But if you didn't receive these teachings, how would you practice? How would you know what to practice? How would you know what to practice? Do you know His Holiness, the Great Lord of the East, before he passed away, the great Shabbat Chuji, Jesambosan Mimaruji, before he passed away, you have to understand something. Let me tell you something about Gelupa hierarchy. You go to the monastery as an ordinary pasture boy, and you study, you become a Geshe after about 15 to 20 years. And that's including examinations. You get your degree from the government and His Holiness. If His Holiness is not on this earth, then you get it from the regent. And after you get your degree, you go into your meditation, you do your practice. You go and teach, if whatever people request of you. Sometimes you are elected to become the abbot of the upper or lower tantric colleges. Gyudu, upper is Gyume, lower is Gyudu. And you can only be a tantric college abbot if you are fully PhD Geshe Param, not a lower Geshe, not a Karam or Doram or Lingze Geshe, must be Param. Then you'll be elected as, disciplinarian. 1 year, you'll be elected as lead chanter in the tantric college, which means your memory, your chanting, everything must be perfect. Your rituals must be fabulous. It isn't just chanting, also rituals, mandalas, all for memory. After that, maybe you're elected as abbot. Some people don't want, some people do. It's not up to them. Once you're elected as abbot, you take your term as abbot. When you finish, then you become a gyude or gyume kensur. When you be a kensur, that means abbot emeritus. Then it is well known you will go onto the ladder of Shabbat Chuji. If it's gyude, Shabbat Chuji. If it's gyume, it'll be Jangse Chuji. So Shabbat Chuji represents Keju Rinpoche. Jangse Chuji represents Gesab Rinpoche. And so those are the 2 regions of the east and the north, representing Gandhin's north and east side. And then the head of all Gelupas is His Holiness Gandhin Rinpoche. Ganden is Ganden. Chi is throne. Rinpoche means precious holder of the Ganden lineage. You are the top. So in the Gelugpa system, you are the highest ranking hierarchical Lama. You are the Pope. He comes in second in Tibet. When you go to the palace of the Dalai Lama, if you're in the palanquin, if you have a celestial umbrella, one of those umbrellas that people carry for you when you're going to teachings, no Lama is allowed to have that in the presence of His Holiness or near the Potala. Only Ganden Chirumchi. When Ganden Chirumchi gives teaching, when Dalai Lama gives teachings, Ganden Chirumchi is the only Lama allowed to have a pendant saddle. I don't care how enlightened you are, or how high you are, or what a great master you are, you don't wear Lama Tsongkhapa's hat in the presence of His Holiness. Only Ganden Chirumchi is allowed. He represents Lord Tsongkhapa on earth. And his two people, so his term is 7 years. And then Shalpa Chökyi becomes Ganden Chirumchi, then the next person in line will be Shalpa Chökyi. And then when this term finishes, then Jangze Chökyi becomes Ganden Chirumchi, then another person becomes the Lord of the North, Jangze Chökyi. Chö Jie is Dharma Lord. Jang or Tse is direction, north. Shad or Shadba is person or east. Shadba Chöje is Dharma Lord of the east. In all the eastern direction, there's no one greater than his knowledge. In Jangze is no one greater in the northern. And then in the center, encompassing everyone, is Ganden Chirumchi. Incredible. Ganden Chirumchi's office is very powerful and very great. All the Gelugpa monasteries, Ganden Sera Drepung, every single Gelugpa monastery is under his direct instruction and blessings. In every New Year's, Ganden Chirumchi will give teachings. You see, with Ganden Chirumchi, you go, oh, let me check out if he can be my guru or not. When he gives teachings, you go, then he's your guru, because he represents Lama Tsongkhapa. Hierarchically, very high. Knowledge-wise, there's no one greater. So just before that position is Shalpa Chökyi, the Lord of the East. I remember our Shalpa Chökyi from Ganden Shatse who has passed away. His emanation came back. When we went to Ganden, when we made offerings in the prayer hall, on the left, below Sorumchi, was a smaller Rinpoche on the throne. That was him. This great Lama, his previous life, which I received teachings from, I used to go wash him. I used to cut his nails. I used to cut his fingernails, toenails. I used to wash them. I used to, file his feet. I used to perfume him with Dettol, wash his clothes. I had the great honor to do that because I know it would advance me in my practice. So I used to grab the opportunity when I can to go and wash him with a servant. He always say, no, I would beg. Because that's what it says in 50 verses, and I believe it. In any case, he is the Lord of the Dharma of the East in all of the eastern direction. He is the Lord. There is no one greater. But when Lakhi Rinpoche gave teachings, Lakhi Rinpoche is his guru, but lower in rank than him, gave teachings. Shalpa Chökyi is like 70 years old. He still attends the Dharma talk. I was in my room, because I have a very nice house there, and it's very nice. Chan, all these people know that I'm very comfortable. I have my hot water heater. If the electricity goes out, I have a generator. Because I can't live without hot water and other luxuries. I've got even netting on my windows so mosquitoes don't come in and feed on me. No, seriously, you think it's a big deal? It's not a big deal. It is. It's a big deal because netting is expensive. And I have beautiful flowers. I have a lot of servants in my house, a lot of assistant moms. I can eat what I want. I have my own cook. I have my people. I change my clothes maybe 2-3 times a day. They'll wash it all, no problem. Sometimes when I feel the smell, they'll boil my clothes outside and they'll wash it. They do everything for me. And I think, I've heard it all. Lam rim, shnam rim. And I heard it all. I really felt that. And I thought, I'm not going to go to these teachings. I'm not going to attend. And I'm not going to go to these pujas. I'm not going to do this. No, really, I did that for years. I'm famous for skipping pujas and skipping things in the main monastery because I have a nice house. So the moral of the story, for sponsors, don't build me a nice house in London. No, I'm just kidding. Build me. No, really, I did that for a long time. Kensui scolded me and all that. But one day my mind changed. Because Lakhi Rinpoche, who is junior in rank to Shalpa Chökyi. So when we go to the temple, when we go to the main monastery, Shalpa Chökyi is on a huge throne, Lakhi Rinpoche is on the throne like that. Huge. Shalpa Chökyi wears a pendant hat. And Lakhi Rinpoche wears a normal hat because he's in the presence of Shalpa Chökyi. Hierarchy, okay? Although they're gurus and disciple. And when hierarchically, he doesn't have to go for these teachings anymore. Actually, it's not necessary because he's Shapachuji. So when he comes, they are in a dilemma how to make a throne. It's no joke, how to make a throne. His throne is the highest, but his guru's throne is got to be higher, but hierarchically it's not correct. So I can hear the monk saying, how? So I just stand and go, what about my throne? Nobody's talking about my throne, you see. So of course I'm very humble, but I drop hints. What about my throne? What about my throne? Where? I got 30 spies. I sent them. What about my throne? They're like, excuse me, what about Tenramji's throne? Go away, you cockroach. I'm like, cockroach. That's right. I'm worried about my throne. They're worried about these great masters' throne. Okay, the point. When Laki Rinpoche gives these teachings, Shapachuji is a Geshe Hwaram. He is a disciplinarian, a lead Umze, and an abbot and ex-abbot of Gyude. And on top of that, he has ascended the Ganden throne of Shapachuji, Lord of the East, and he's going to be Ganden Chiramchi. And when Laki Rinpoche is giving Lamrim, he says, I forgot some things, I want to go and learn. I was like, I heard that with my own ear. Because I went for teachings with him, and I asked, are you attending teachings? He says, oh, of course. He says, Dhamma talk, must attend. I said, why? He said, Bacha Shawar, which means I must plant imprints in my mind for the future. I must plant imprints. And I realized what he means when I read this. Imprints, how important they are. Being that great of a teacher, he still goes to Dharma teachings, still attends Dharma activities, still does all Dharma work. And he's the Lord of the East. And I'm the Lord of the cockroaches. And I don't want to go. And from that day on, my mind changed. No joke. You know what happened? I'll tell you why it changed. I realized that when we understand the Dharma enough, we can gain this kind of enthusiasm. We can cut away laziness, we can gain this kind of enthusiasm that never ends, that grows and grows and grows. And this enthusiasm infects everybody around us, inspires everybody around us, and it blesses people around us. Why? It's very nice to see everybody attending Dharma or doing Dharma or being together. That's why we have this together. I used to talk at home because I'd be lazy to go to puja because I have to dress up and look proper, and sometimes I forget the rituals and I don't want to embarrass or, all that stuff, all the formality. So I always try to skip pujas, and then Cancer and would go to pujas. I said, Cancer, why don't you skip pujas? You look tired today. He said, no. Puja with the Sangha talk cannot miss. I said, no, you look very tired, why don't you miss it? And he said, what are you getting at? I said, because he would go, I have to go. Even, I knew it. I knew you had multi-fun. It was true. I was thinking, oh God, if Cancer doesn't go, then, I can stay home and take care of him. Serve him and massage him. Just skip puja because it's like hours and hours and hours and chanting and all that stuff. You think Crystal will drive you nuts. Those people, I tell you. The Sangha. Yeah. And so, when I saw all this, it changed my mind. Not in a negative way. I'm not criticizing you or anyone, and I'm on tape. I'm not criticizing. I dare not. Why? Everybody has their karma. But we can't use that as an excuse forever. When I experienced that, when I saw that, I thought, wow. So these lamas spend this much time. Studying, meditating, doing their sadhanas. Never break their sadhanas. I never heard of my guru saying, oh, I'm too tired, I'm exhausted, whatever. I don't think I'm going to do my sadhana today. Never. I'll see my old gurus with diabetes and their insulin is shooting up. And they have their arms swollen and they're suffering. And they sit there like this, do their sadhanas. Even His Holiness Tridharma Rinpoche, when he was very, very sick in the hospital, could not do his sadhana. He was very ill. So his attendant read his whole sadhana to him. It's permissible that when we're sick, we have someone read our sadhana to us. So at least we hear it, even in that kind of situation. And their sadhanas are 6 to 7 hours a day. They'll never miss it. So, for us, 50 prostrations a day, 35 confessional Buddhas, recite Manjushris, only if my samsara activities allow me. Because samsara is a higher Buddha than Shakyamuni. Of course. We worship samsara. Why? Our altars are small, our statues are small, but our car is big, our house is big, our trips are big, and our food, and Chinese can spend. Chinese really can spend on a restaurant $300-400, never mind. But $300-400 for temple or tata or dharmakul, installment, 24 months please. Yes. We actually worship samsara. That's not criticism. That is something to check our minds. Because everything we have for samsara is big. Everything for Dharma is small. The smallest statues, the cheapest statues, the biggest bargains. As much as we can get away with not expanding. Why? Small is okay, wow. Okay, buy small car, wow. Buy small car, buy one for 20 years, wow. Buy Proton, okay, wow. Can buy BMW, but cannot buy big statue or one discount. You're not a bad person. You haven't realized the benefits. You haven't realized. You're not bad. So we can check our mind if we really are Dharma that way. We don't need people to check. So next time we drive up to KH here, we don't have to cover our car or borrow our neighbor's Proton to drive here so we don't get teased by Ruchi. No, we don't have to. No one can check. Or we don't have to wear a hat and bandana and run to our car. No one can see us which car we're going to. No need to be embarrassed. But we check ourselves. Even if people check us, they're in the wrong also because they have their attachments too because they wish they had what we had. Right? We have what we have, make us suffer. They wish what we have. It's all the same. No different. Nobody here in Malaysia got Proton. You say, yeah, give you Vietnam. Say, no, thank you. I'm a Buddhist. Not really. Not good or bad. It's logic. So, our teachers engage that much time in studying the Dharma, engaging in retreats. Whatever difficulties they have gone through, they turn that around and they make it to benefit others. And when we're around our teachers, we feel energized, we want to do practice, we want to do something. Even when our teacher scolds us, most people that scold us just goes off. But if our teacher scolds us, if we're very evil, we're not happy, but it affects us. If we're mediocre, okay, we try to make a change while he's watching. When he's not watching, go back to ourselves. If we're very good, go, oh, yeah, that must be, since my teacher told me it must be like that, I think I'll make a change. I won't argue and debate with anyone. It's right or wrong, because that's my teacher. But I will do it. The highest class of beings. The most highest class who are ready for Tantra, the most highest class are those that even when the teacher says it once will not need to say it, they've already transformed their ways. The teacher never needs to repeat. Those beings that the teacher repeat the same things to will not be able to achieve Tantra. Not in this life. They can receive the initiation, but it will be the same as if they don't receive it. Why? They will not like what they receive, they will not keep up the commitments and not keep up the practice. So it will be the same as not receiving. Same, no difference. So the teacher does this to study, is so patient with the 6 paramitas with all of us, enthusiastically always teaches the Dharma, absorbs negativity and difficulties, extremely generous, always patient, and always giving. If we displease such a person, we can displease anyone. If we disappoint or break our commitment and promise to this person, we can break our commitment and this to anyone. We can check a person's quality by their Guru devotion. If their Guru devotion, the real Guru devotion, not sit there and lick the floor where your Guru has walked, but what your Guru says, you do. If you check a person who has real Guru devotion, also their other activities with Dharma brothers and sisters will be very nice. Their interaction with other people will be very nice. Their interaction with the people they love will be very nice. And you know what will happen? They will be able to affect other people to come onto the Dharma. How much effect you have is how much you practice. How much you practice is how much effect you have. When you can bring no one onto the Dharma stable and long term, it reflects your own practice, your own knowledge. So don't keep saying, oh, I knew. Some people can talk all day about the Dharma. Not even one person comes to the Dharma due to your talking. Why? You yourself don't practice. You yourself is a fake. Maybe you're just doing it for business. Maybe you're doing it just for money. Maybe you're even brave enough to sell Dharma for your own money. Very dangerous. Why is it dangerous? Because something that can create so much merit for you, you push away to demerit. Selling Buddha statues to other people can be very meritorious if we have the right motivation. We're not motivated by material gain. Why? We help them to buy something to help them to collect the merit towards that image. No motivation. It can be very, in fact, selling statues, working in Dharma shop, just example, can be a very, very virtuous work. Very powerful and very virtuous. Why? we are spreading Dharma to others. And it can be very non-virtuous for us if our motivation is bad, or material-minded, or we're after money, or after something that is not Dharma. And then we think, well, we should run away from that. You can run away from that. You can go away from that. You can. But you can't take that. You can't take that. You can't go away from yourself. So wherever you go, you're going to have that quality. And that quality will manifest again and again and again. And you may say, well, I have friends, I have people that like me. Yes. If you hoo-hoo, ha-ha with them, if you do all types of negative things and talk about gossip and nothing that matters, and girlfriends and boyfriends and dogs and cats and pets, yes, they'll be your friend because that's their level. But it's sad that you can be friends with these and not bring you to a high level, but they bring you down to their level. Why? Because your level is that. So if your level is that, how do you expect to find happiness? How do you expect to come out of your problems and difficulties? How do you expect to make a better world for yourself and the people you love? How do you expect to find that? So Guru devotional practices are not fanatical. They are not illogical. And when we do them correctly, they will point out to us that a Buddha does exist. And Buddha attainments are possible. And higher attainments are possible. And higher ethical qualities of human beings, kindness and forgiveness, generosity, are definitely possible. Why? There are beings among us who can do that. So to be near such a being, to be around such a being, or to be in contact with such a being, or to support, or to help, or do anything near such a being, and I've done it many times with my gurus, in any way, will only serve to benefit us and to benefit others. That is all. And when they have this type of knowledge, and you find it complicated, you shouldn't be scared. You shouldn't read this book and say, I don't understand, I get a headache. I don't understand this, I don't understand, I don't blah, 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 I don't understand, and complain. You shouldn't. You should in fact look at it another way. This is the depth of Lord Buddha's teachings. Some other faiths do not teach you the method to overcome anger, hatred, jealousy, desire, ignorance. They just tell you in their tenets, don't be angry. Forgive when they hurt you. When they steal from you, give. Practice patience when people are angry at you. And it stops there. And people worship these words and these books and these tenets and these kind of papers a lot. But you see, those types of faiths only give you the end of the road. They don't tell you how to get there. Whereas a Buddhistic practice such as this in the meaning of life, it actually tells you how to get there minutely, and before it gives you instructions on how to get to the end of the road, to be compassionate, gentle, kind, loving, etc. It tells you how to develop those qualities by telling you the knowledge. And the knowledge is told to you by people who practice it, who definitely have those attainments. So people with those attainments receive those from another person who has attainments and practice it. And they can teach you. And it's so complicated. In fact, when you see how complicated one of this is, you should in fact take refuge in Buddha's teachings even more. Why? It's scientific. It's logical. It's concise. It's clear. It's direct. And there's no room for doubt. And there's no blind faith in this book at all. Not one iota of blind faith. You have met the teachings of Lama Tsongkhapa, who give you this type of teachings that is not just follow, if you don't go to hell. Do, how to do, don't know. Give, why, don't know. And then at the end of that, a promise of heaven. Even in this book, I have centered an incredible teaching which remind me to go over with you. How to get to a pure land without having to be let go of all our negative karma and our imprints. We can still get to a pure land, because that's been bothering me for a long time. I never told any of you because I was afraid you asked me, I won't have an answer. I look stupid. What? I was thinking, In my condition, how am I going to get to Kachara paradise? For me, it's just a dream. So never mind, let me spread the dream to them. Give me your money, thank you. But I found the logical answer in His Holiness' teachings on how we can get out of samsara and make samsara cease before we have purified all our negative karma and dispositions. Did any of you come across that? Good. Logically, clearly. So in fact, when you find the Buddha's teachings are incredibly complex and difficult and hard and very, very detailed and extremely scientific, this is telling you the quality of Buddha's mind and how it operates. And that's who you're taking refuge in. That's who you're taking refuge in. Someone who can speak about this. And for us, we read it, we're just think about it. But His Holiness can give 3 days of discourse on this in detail. His Holiness. Don't even call Dalai Lama. His Holiness. I have a different title. HL Tenrimchi, but don't ask me what. Something like His Laziness. But never mind, at least I got a His one. Switch to L later on. Maybe I can buy my title. What do you think? Now, this fella here taught all this that you can't even grasp. What's the difference between this knowledge that you can't grasp, that you find so complicated and so deep and so hard, compared to a subject in university like biochemistry and all that? Chemical engineering, forget it, like here I run. Trigonometry. What makes that so thick? Psychology. Have you guys taken psychology? No, if you do, make sure you have someone who do your reports for you and read up for you, because not me, thank you very much. Those subjects are so hard, and yet people can spend so much time and energy, 8 to 10 years to get their PhD. And they spend 30 to 35 years of their short-lived life and a lot of money for PhD they can spend for their house, spend for their car, spend for their travel, spend for their room accommodations, spend for their school fees. They can spend everything and they can spend it for years. But if it's for Dharma or charity, don't got that. Don't got. Not logical to me. So my point is what? People can spend that much years and time on this knowledge, just biochemistry, bioengineering. How many years does that knowledge benefit you? How many years? By the time you reach 50, you're like Henry already, like this with your glasses when you're reading what? If you get some disease that's degenerative, that's it. Whatever professor this, professor that, they put it on your gravestone, professor. How many years can you use that knowledge? And that knowledge only contains one small branch of learning on this planet that's going to be blown away at the end of time anyway. But this knowledge and the time you spend on this will carry forth your whole life now to make you a very happy person. Change the situation around you. Really change. Really changed. Even physically not changed, by your perspective it changed. You don't suffer. And this knowledge, if you choose to be a Buddhist, some of us in this room are. If you choose to be a Buddhist, this knowledge will carry you into your next life, and your next life, and your next life, and your next life. You will come back a supreme being. Worshipped, praised, respected by others. Great appearance, great speech, great motivation, great mind, and anywhere you go, whether you have a degree or not, you will be able to achieve what you want to achieve. By hook or crook. Why? You have the qualities that are fundamental to make it, the 6 paramitas. The knowledge we go for school is something that people don't have a higher thing to do, so they do that. They don't have anything higher. People say education is good. It is good. It is good. It itself is not good. And that only is your source of happiness? No. No. That means every single educated person with a degree is fabulous and wonderful and caring and sharing and loving and very open-minded and very unselfish. I don't think so. In fact, His Holiness says in his video on compassion that sometimes education becomes a major obstacle for our development as a human being. So, this knowledge that you spend time on, and I love His Holiness on page 34, he says like this: so keep your mind on the topics being discussed. Listen with a pure motivation, without sleep. I love it, page 34. Even His Holiness has got people sleeping on him. I feel better. I feel wonderful. When I read that, I highlighted in yellow, look. Even the Dalai Lama got people sleeping on him, dozing away. So he says here, without sleep. I said, okay, I'm holy. What do you think about that? Nothing more irritating than looking out in the crowd and you're talking away, and how many years you took to learn the Dharma, how much effort you came to come here, how much time you put into building a temple, how much effort and meetings you had with committee and people to put air conditioning and set a system up, and then how much effort it was even to put out the cushions and lay out the flowers and turn the place on and get it ready so people can walk in and give a teaching, and they sit there like, let me tell you, if it wasn't for the 6 paramitas, I showed them something else. Only 5 though. The 5 paramitas. They don't think about that. So, people who enthusiastically attend the Dharma are unhappy to attend the Dharma things. They're not good. They're trying to be good. People who unenthusiastically don't want to attend or try to avoid or don't want to, they're not bad. They're trying to be good too. All in it on one's level of ignorance. One's level of ignorance. So, when you see this much knowledge, this much incredible diversity in knowledge that's pure knowledge, is not even scholastic. It is not just talking about something on and on, like theories. It's not even talking about like some play or some theater, and they write comments and they write thousands of pages of literature on this play, the Nutcracker or whatever, Shakespeare, and it goes on and centuries on, and they debate about it. They have Shakespearean clubs. I sit there going, what do you get from that? And yet they can spend that much time and energy. That much time and energy. Why? Ignorance. 2 types of ignorance, as Holden says. One is wrong imputation of the mode of existence of phenomenon. Number 2 is by wrong knowledge. When people give us wrong knowledge, when we follow a wrong religion, when we follow wrong people, when we follow wrong teachers, when we follow wrong knowledge, then we base our practice on wrong knowledge. And many people here, when they hear some rumor, they say, oh, I heard that, bye-bye, see you later, bye Guru, bye Dharma, bye, they give the altar back, they give everything back. Immediately by rumor, they run off. By wrong knowledge, they create ignorance in their mind. Some people follow wrong teachers. Teachers that teach funny things, say funny things, not logical, mystical, you cannot meet, you cannot see, you never hear, you have to visualize. All you can do is visualize. And whatever they teach, we follow. When we follow, no result. Why no result? We have to check if the 6 paramitas are growing. We have to check. So, ignorance that arises from wrong knowledge, or wrong teachers, or wrong bases, or wrong conceptions, conceptual ignorance, is also very detrimental. A wrong conceptual ignorance is able to repair much faster and easier than imputed ignorance. Much more difficult to repair. Because imputation or imputed ignorance based on wrong imputation is very deep-seated, and it goes on for many aeons. And it's with us in life after life after life. So when we see these vast corpus of teachings, when we see these vast corpus of knowledge, in fact, instead of being shy or scared or run away, we should in fact develop greater faith by changing our perspective, by really trusting the Buddha's teachings. And you know how that affects us? When we really trust the Buddha's teachings, and then all the things that we found difficult to do, you will see it melt away. Why? Born from knowledge, born from logic, Born from contemplation arises faith. And faith will help us even in situations when we don't understand the situation, because if the Buddha's Dharma says don't or do, we do it based on faith. And that faith is arisen from another knowledge we have gained. So when we are able to be generous, it can arise from faith. If we're able to be patient, it can arise from faith and not knowledge. If we're enthusiastic and not lazy, it can arise from faith. Why can it arise on faith? If we take the time to develop faith, then faith will arise. And how do we develop it? We can examine our teachers. We can examine our teachers' teachers. We can examine the great structures such as Gandhin and how they operate. We can examine other Dharma brothers and sisters who do so much work unselfishly so that we can just waltz in and have the Dharma. We can look at generous sponsors who, instead of keeping money for themselves and for their betterment, they can give money for the Dharma so that other people can gain. In Tibetan Buddhism, we respect sponsors very much. Lamas all have great sponsors. The greater the Lama, or how much the Lama can achieve, is dependent on the sponsorship. And when the sponsors are there, they have a title. They call in Tibetan Jinda, or literally in English sponsor, but it doesn't have a negative connotation. Why? In Tibetan Buddhism, Lamas can only move forward by sponsorship. How many sponsors that the sponsor has and how long the sponsors stay and how much they do is dependent on the Lama's assistants and attendants. If the Lama's assistants and attendants show themselves well and talk well, are good, professional, many sponsors will come. Sponsors can be attracted to the Lama and maintained by only the sponsors, the Lama's assistants and students. Likewise, sponsors can be scared away by the students. It's all dependent on the students. So when you have one set of students running around the Lama, you see if they grow. If you have another set of attendants running around the Lama, you see if they grow. Then you check, how can the Lama grow this time, don't grow this time? With this group, grow, with this group, don't grow. Why? Because it's dependent on the students around the Lama. So the students are evil and angry and judgmental and fighting and always defensive and always poor me, then definitely no sponsors, no one will come. The Lama cannot grow, no matter how great he is. If the students around them practice, have enthusiasm, push themselves, and are kind, and really, even if they get angry and whatever, they have difficulties, they bounce back quickly, then more students and more sponsors will come. Why? If I'm a monster, none of you would take refuge in Buddha. If the Dalai Lama was a living monster, no one would even listen to the Buddha. No one. No one. So, I'm not the Buddha, but I'm the student of the Buddha. And therefore, if the students act well on behalf of the teacher, then there will be more students. If the students act funny on behalf of the teacher, don't know how to do things, don't know how to do rituals, don't know how to do black tea, don't know how to do talk, always forget, don't want to learn, lazy, make excuses, then people come and say, oh, I don't need that because I have that in my normal life. If we're greedy, we're not generous, we don't want to give, we always make excuses, and we always cover for our greediness and miserliness, why would people want to donate to us? Because they don't see you donating. Why? Why? If you're not patient, and you don't have enthusiasm, and you don't push yourself, why would anybody push themselves? You think just build a great center, build a big property, and just disappear, the Dharma will grow? No. No. The Buddha didn't even build hard structures. He had huts and banana leaves and all that for the rainy season. Otherwise, he wandered in the forests. No, all these don't help. It is your attendance and your Dharma practice and your direct effort to transform your mind and you becoming more kinder, more patient, developing enthusiasm, and you being generous and giving. That's what will attract other people to come. If you don't do that, why should other people do that? If you're unstable all the time, why would your Lama attract people who are stable to help? Because you're unstable, you disappoint other people, they don't want to get involved. They say, hey, I don't want to get involved with that instability. I've got that enough in my life. So if your Lama's organization and ladrong and house and place is filled with angry people, vengeful people, and people who are unreliable and always messing up things, always excuses, why would new people join? Because that's what they see. So people ask you, what's going on? You say, I don't know. Well, those people say, I don't know, see you later too. So if you're always angry, if you come to a student's house and the llama's always screaming away at some monster student, they'll say, look, there's a monster llama, a monster student. It's okay, I go back to my samsara. I'm very happy they're being, not have to deal with this. Why? How you look, even how you smell. Who wants to be around smelly Buddhists? Who wants to be, you got bad breath, smelly, oily, dirty, unkept. Your house is smelly and dirty, unkept, you don't care. Even other Dharma students you live with, you're smelly, you're dirty, you're nasty, you don't care. Outside, oh, Dharma, Dharma, Rinpoche, Rinpoche. Inside, you're a pig, you're a slob. You don't clean up, you don't show respect to your Dharma brothers and sisters. Even when the toilet paper run out, you don't want to buy toilet paper, you wait for the other person to buy it. If you're this type of person, how do you expect to spread the Dharma? There are conditions to spread the Dharma. There are conditions. If you follow it, it will grow. So if you're always thinking about money, even if you're a geshe, and there are some cases of 1 or 2 rare cases, there are geshes who are after money. I've seen. I dare not say the name. They don't grow. Their students don't grow. Their organization don't grow. Why? Sooner or later, people see through. If great geshis with so much knowledge after 20 years of having a PhD in Tibetan Buddhism, and a monastery, they're monks too, and they have motivation for money and they can't spread Dharma. What about stupid people like us? What about that? Then people say, oh, I don't want to do Dharma work because it's dangerous. It's not dangerous. You make it dangerous. You make yourself in danger anywhere you go because it's your own attitude. Oh, I don't want to work for Dharma, I'm scared. I collect back karma. No! You collect back karma on your own before you met Dharma. Hello? Before you met Dharma, you were doing fabulous collecting back karma. After you met the Dharma, it's that Dharma tells you what's right and wrong, and you're a little more conscious and scared. And you know. But before Dharma, you were collecting a lot of back karma on your own. Doing a great job. You don't need any help. We should pay the tanka if you make offerings to you. That's right. So don't say, oh, if I'm in Dharma, I collect a lot of bad karma, I can't do this, I can't do that. Lame, tired, ignorant excuse. Dharma is so hard. I hear that all the time. I can't push myself. That's the way I am. It's so difficult. It's not Dharma that's difficult. You're difficult. Dharma doesn't make anything difficult for you. When you tell people Dharma is difficult, automatically anybody who knows Dharma look at you and say, oh, mommy, come home. People not in Dharma, they say, either way, Dharma is stupid. And the people on your level, they yell out, Dharma very hard, well, let's run away and let's go hang out at home and pick our nose, eat a pizza, and oh, mommy, come home, watch TV, and we'll be a Buddha, 20 billion aeons later. Yeah. So when you tell people Dharma makes your life hard, Dharma makes your finances hard, Dharma makes your mind difficult, Dharma takes your time away, Dharma takes too much time, I am very sorry. You are wrong. If you spend money for the Dharma, you get the benefit now and in the future. Read the book. If you spend your time and energy in the Dharma, you get the benefit now and later. If you fight your mind in accordance with the Dharma, you get the benefit. So if you say Dharma is hard, you're wrong. Dharma is not hard. You're hard. The harder the Dharma is the harder you are. If you have to stay awake during Dharma talk and you find it difficult, test yourself. No joke, no criticism. Test yourself. If you're watching a movie the whole night, some fashion show or some movie or some whatever that you like, are you wide awake? I've tested my friends. I've gone to some movie with people up to 3, 4 a.m. When it's a movie they like. Someone when finished, they go, Gamua. Dharma talk, they're sleepy. There's no criticism. That's how you check your mind. That's how your mind tricks you to make you feel Dharma is hard. When you feel lazy about Dharma, you say, oh yeah, Dharma is so hard, this is so hard. It's not Dharma that's making it hard. It's you. Do you know why? Actually, listen carefully, because I've seen this in America, in TVL. When we feel despondent, When we feel disappointed, and when we feel down about Dharma, or Dharma people, it's a good sign. Why is that a good sign? Because your mind is healing. It's debating, it's thinking, it's going through, and it's comparing. Because a lot of things that you see, it challenges you to change. So your fear of change makes you scared, depressed, lazy, despondent, don't want to be involved, want to go away. Why? You're afraid your happiness is being taken away or challenged. That's wrong. When you're feeling depressed and down, when you feel loss of faith or confidence, it's a very good sign. And you should not hold on to it. You don't make it more, you don't make it less. You let it pass. You observe it like every other emotion. I mean, some of you are married to husbands and wives. Didn't you think, I want to divorce? And then when you let it pass, okay. Sometimes you're in a job, I want to get out of here. When you're there for a few months, 1 year, 2 years, okay, I stay, I like it. People, food, even some food you eat, like, ugh. Then after a while, I say, I like more. I used to hate Coca-Cola, Burger King, and McDonald's. I hated it for 5 years. Now I'm trying to get a Ronnie McDonald poster to worship. I love McDonald's. But I'm trying to get out of it again because, I keep bumping into Cokie and McDonald's. Anyways, when you feel down and lazy and despondent, what's despondent?